Hey y'all, happy Tuesday. Welcome to Growth Groove with Dr. Ericka. It's Tuesday, so you know what to do. I'm so happy you decided to join me. Now, don't worry, if you're not watching this live, I'm just happy you came. I'm just happy you chose to do something for yourself and to share some quality time with me. I feel like I need a song that's something like, Won't You Be My Neighbor? But you're not my neighbor, you're my internet friend. But welcome to this episode of Growth Groove with Dr. Ericka. If you don't know me, I am your host, Dr. Ericka, Harvard trained double board certified psychiatrist and integrative lifestyle coach. I am on a mission to help you be better, do better, and live better. I do that through my adult telepsychiatry, my books, including my latest book, Fix Your Fairy Tale, A Woman's Guide to a Great Life, Love, and Legacy, my speaking, and my podcast, Better with Dr. Ericka. I do all of this to help busy people like you that show up for work, you show up for your family, you show up for your friends, you show up for your community, but you often don't show up for yourself. Or you look around and you're like, who's showing up for me? So I do all of this to help put you back in your life. Now, I've got a couple of housekeeping things before we get started. First housekeeping thing is if you know someone that needs this, please share. Sharing is caring. The other thing is if you know someone that needs this, please tag them. Just hit tag. The next thing is if you're watching it later, don't even worry about it. Just take hashtag replay in the comments to let me know you were here. As you come in, let me know where you are watching. And we're going to do this quality time. Now, today's topic is I can't talk. 3 resources for a mental health crisis. You might be like, okay, why are we doing this? Well, recently I found out that another Black female physician had died by suicide. And we do know that there are just a lot of mental health pressures going on right now, especially in the context of what's going on in our larger community and culture. So, with that means that we're also seeing people be here in crisis. And I've worked in hospitals too. And thanks for showing up, Chuck. So I've seen these crises. And one of the questions I get so often when I speak is, well, what do I do? What do we do if there's a crisis? What do we do if someone wants to hurt themselves? What do I do if I want to hurt myself? And people just don't know what to do. And the other day, someone actually asked me, well, what's an alternative with concerns of if people call 911 and the police come, especially in the Black community, that someone would get hurt. So I wanted to do some quality time today because it can be hard to know what to do, especially when it's happening. What are some resources when these crises arise? Okay. Now, before we get to the resources, I want to break down quickly. And hey, Dr. Crease, great to see you. Is what is a mental health crisis? Because sometimes I feel like what people think is a crisis and what people term crisis in the mental health professional world are not the same. So typically, what we're going to consider a crisis in the mental health profession is thoughts of self-harm, thoughts of hurting others, and just total inability to care for self. So it's usually a high level of impairment where someone is at imminent risk. Either the person's at imminent risk because of suicidality, or they're at imminent risk because they can't take care of themselves, or someone else is at imminent risk because they're thinking of hurting them. That's typically how a mental health crisis is defined in the community for mental health professionals. Now, I do realize that there are going to be things that feel like a crisis to you, and that doesn't mean they're not important. It just means the intervention you may need is a little less, because sometimes people feel really depressed, or they feel bad, or they're like, I just feel like crap. And it might not hit a level where you need to go to the hospital, but you need help. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what to do when something serious happens and you're not sure exactly what to do. What are your options? Are you ready? Let me know. Stick it in the chat. Are you ready? Oh, thanks, Hey Sherry, for hopping on. It's always great to see you. So shall we go ahead and get to it? Now I'm going to tell you a story. I said 3. I'm going to break the secret. You're going to get more than 3, because apparently I can't stop at 3. It's like, can't stop, won't stop. Like from P. Diddy. So we're talking about 3 resources for a mental health crisis. Now, these are things, one of the reasons I wanted to talk about these is they can be things you use for yourself. It can be things you use for loved ones. There may be times where you're dealing with coworkers or community workers. You may work with kids, just the church. just I want you to have these tools available. The ideal is if you never need to use these tools, but something may arise. I want you to have the tools. So, what's number one? Number one is a local crisis line. I'm going to put this in here because a lot of people don't know what these are. So, the one we have in Georgia is called the Georgia's Crisis Access Line. So, it stands for, the short version is GCAL. But a lot of times you can put mental health crisis line in your community, either the county or state, and something will pop up. Now, you might be, Dr. Erica, why should I consider this when there's also every TV show has the suicide prevention line? Suicide prevention line is great, and we will talk about it. The thing I do like about local crisis lines is they know what your local resources are. They know the hospitals, they know the different kinds of programs and different levels of care. So they know all of these things so that when they say, hey, this is what I think you need in this moment, then they're going to be able to give you more specifics. But the reason I love crisis lines is because they can help determine what to do next. Because most of you aren't mental health professionals. You weren't trained to figure out, is this an emergency? Is it not an emergency? If it's an emergency, what do I do? You weren't trained in that. So what we're doing is giving you resources so you're not going to have to make these decisions. You're not going to need to sit and try to assess how much of an emergency is this. So a lot of times the local crisis line, because we also have things such as partial hospitalization program, intensive outpatient programs, places where you may be able to get a psychiatric specific eval that's not an emergency room, they're going to know these things. So that's one thing I always like to let people know about local crisis lines. And it may be helpful to have a note in your phone, a sticky, or something where you just write down this information. So, yeah, you might want to take some notes today and look up your local numbers and things so that if something happens, you have that information at the ready. Number two, we talked about the National Suicide Hotline, or they'll call it the National Suicide Prevention Line. Sometimes they call it the helpline. And that's the number you see everywhere, which is 1-800-273-8255. Um, and that's just the general line. Now, the thing I love about this line is that you can actually call it if you're having difficulties, and you'll have someone that is trained to answer the phone to talk to you. And they can help you also decide if you need to get some more help or just help talk you. Sometimes they talk people off the ledge, and they can also provide information if you're trying to support someone, you're not sure what to do, you can actually still call the line. So it's a line that's always there 24/7. So I always like to remind people that that line is out there. The next resource is your local emergency room, because the truth about it is they're not a ton of just freestanding psych emergency rooms, places you go. This is mental health emergency, you just go here. So the emergency room ends up being kind of the place to triage to figure out what people need. So the emergency room is still an option. If you can safely get someone in the car to get them there, ideally, a lot of times it may go a little bit smoother if you do it that way versus if it's a situation where you don't feel like you can get someone in the car safely or they can ride safely. Because it's one thing getting someone in a car, it's another thing getting from A to B. And I've heard a lot of stories about people or even kids or teens that didn't want to go or were confused, and they're opening doors, trying to get out of the moving car, or they're hitting or assaulting someone as they're driving. So the emergency room is an option. The question sometimes is it best for you to drive somebody, or is it best to call 911 and have someone come? Now, those were three. Now, I know those don't feel like a lot. Do they feel like a lot? Let me know. So, I want to give you a couple of bonus. Because number one, who doesn't like a bonus? But number two, there are more resources I want to give you other than three. But if I have to just narrow down three, those top three are ones that are pretty easy to have at the ready. The next one is 911. There's always 911. You can call 911. I realize there are some concerns in different communities about whether or not who's going to show up when you call the 911. And they're working on some national initiatives to have an alternative number for mental health emergencies so that you actually have someone come to your house, even if it's law enforcement that is specifically trained in mental health versus having someone just show up. But 911 is an option. And I want to remind people that it is an option, especially when you're dealing with folks that you can't get to safely get to the hospital. So I want you to remember 911 is still an option. Another bonus, here are a couple of additional lines. One is SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health. Um, Lord Jesus, why can't I remember? I'm having the biggest blank. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. I'm like, I just had a brief blank. I'm like, ooh, that SA. So you can call. This is another crisis or helpline that can be used for mental health emergencies, including substance abuse issues. So I want you to have that one available. The other one is if you're a veteran, there is also a veterans line. And I've worked in the VA, so I've actually the good thing about using these veterans lines, if you're a veteran, especially if you use services in the VA, is they easily will communicate with your treatment team. They'll actually get notifications and your calls, everything's available. So the upside about if you're a veteran and you use the veterans line is the continuity of care. And also, there are some resources that are very veteran specific that the Veterans Crisis Line would know about. And also, naturally, they're going to be a little bit even more clued into veteran specific issues. I got one more if I can get my cursor in the right place. The next one is the crisis text line because everyone doesn't necessarily want to call and talk. So that one's, you see it up sometimes places. It's 741-741. You can text home. Home is probably the easiest. If you'll see this multiple times where you'll see 741-741 in a different word. All goes to the same place. It's just it helps them track where what organizations they may be getting information from. So I've also mentioned Silence the Shame before. Silence the Shame has their own, and it's silence. It goes to the same place, but then people know that you may be in touch with that organization. So if you see another thing to text, it all goes to the same place, though, so that you know you don't get confused. So I hope those are helpful. I wanted to give you some resources that you can use if you or someone around you is struggling and is having a mental health crisis and you're just not sure what to do. And I wanted to make sure that you had some options other than simply going to the emergency room or calling 911. I also want you to have options because there are times that you might not quite be able to tell how much of an emergency is this. And that way you can call a crisis line and it can help guide you through what are going to be the best steps for you in that moment so that you don't have to try to play doctor like you stayed in a Holiday Inn Express the night before. So I want you to be able to have that information. I'm going to do a quick review. Then we're going to get you out of there. Again, if you know someone that needs this, please share. Also, if you know someone that needs this, please tag. The next thing, if you're watching it later, just put hashtag replay. I would love to know that you're here. And thank you all so much for showing up and getting this information so that you can not only help yourself, but help your community and help your loved ones. And as I said before, these are some numbers that it's good to have written somewhere, or maybe in a note, program them into your phone, have a sticky, something. Just think, you never know when you're going to get that call. You never know. You just never know. Or when it's going to be that moment and someone just confides in you that they're struggling. So I want you to be able to have these resources. So you ready? 3 resources. Well, it's more than 3. You already know it's more than 3. We're talking about number 1, your local crisis line. You can just Google your state or county crisis line. Great thing about local crisis line, they know about local resources. So they can probably give more targeted referrals or advice at times, especially if it's not a situation where you need to go to the emergency room. The next is the National Suicide Hotline or the National Suicide Prevention Line or the National Suicide Helpline. 1-800-273-8255, 1-800-273-8255. You can call that number. There will be someone trained on the other end to talk to you. The great thing about that is they also do a great job of talking people off the ledge, but they also know resources and can help you decide if you need to call 911 or go to the ER. The next is the emergency room, the good old emergency room. It's a catch-all place where if someone is in crisis, then they can help get them to the next place that they need to be. And the thing to know is part of the reason we have all of these different resources is, and one of the reasons I want people to let people know when they're struggling is, number 1, ideally, the best time to help with mental health is before it's a crisis. That's the ideal. But if it's not, the other thing is I want to make sure you get the appropriate help. Number 2, number 3, I don't want anybody to get hurt. And when those ultimate things happen, like when people die from suicide, there are so many questions. And I want you to be armed with as much knowledge as you can. You can't always fix things, you can't always prevent things, but I want you to have as much knowledge as you can so you can do the best that you can. And that you're armed to be able to help. And also, you're armed to be able to help yourself if you find yourself in a difficult situation. But the emergency room is a place where they can help determine what you need. But the one thing I do want to let you know is just because someone has thoughts of self-harm or thoughts of dying doesn't necessarily mean they have to be in the hospital. So I'd encourage people to still get help because it doesn't mean they're going to necessarily lock you away. The next bonus, good old 911. I know people like to avoid it, but sometimes it's the only thing there for you. And at the end of the day, I'd rather you call 911 and someone get help versus being afraid to call 911 and you look up and someone gets hurt. And I do realize that sometimes things don't always go right when you call 911, but it goes right more than it goes wrong. Next bonus is the SAMHSA line, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. You see it, 1-800-662-HELP. And the Veterans Crisis Line, which is 1-800-273-8255. So you got the Veterans Crisis Line. The last bonus was the crisis text line. You just text home to 741-741, home to 741-741. One quick additional note is there is a suicide prevention chat line, so you can just kind of Google or put suicide prevention line, and on their website there also is a chat option. So if you don't want to text but you'd rather chat on your computer or something, that's an option. The Veteran Crisis Line, if you put Veterans Crisis Line in, they also have a chat line too, and you can chat instead. That's what I got for you tonight. I just wanted to be armed with some resources so that, yes, and yes, I was talking about that earlier, but didn't give the actual number. Yes, it'll be much better once it's open. I've actually worked in some communities where they did have some alternative numbers that were much better. And yes, I definitely agree that that is going to be a much better option. And I can't wait until it's truly available because that's one of the things that I think that keeps people from using 911 is that fear of who's going to show up and how are they going to react and are they going to be culturally competent and are they going to understand the difference between someone having a mental health issue versus someone that is homicidal, that wants is really actively trying to kill people. Because one of the things we've seen happen way too frequently is times where 911 is called, they misperceive the threat and they react with violence when that's not what's actually appropriate and don't have good de-escalation techniques. So I will be really excited once that is available because I think it's going to really be a huge shift in the amount of resources and support and just the experience that people have versus the experience you have when 911 arrives. Thanks for putting the actual number up. I appreciate it. So that's what I wanted you to have. I wanted you to have some resources because the hard thing is we are in a season where people are hurting. There is a lot of pain. There is so much going on. I can't tell you how many calls I get personally about I'm in crisis. I know someone is in crisis. I'm not sure if I want to live. I get those. I get lots of calls. Lots of calls. I do, and I just want you to be able to be present for your loved ones and for your community in a way that's safe. So by having resources, it helps you feel safer, and it helps you help the people you love and the people you care about and the people that you're responsible for, but also in a way that doesn't put you in a position where you're trying to do things that are at a higher training level than you have. So that's why I love these crisis resources. And it's one of the reasons I encourage people to utilize a lot of these crisis lines because they can help you figure out what is the most appropriate place for you to go. And sometimes they can go ahead and get referrals for you places if you don't necessarily need to be in the hospital. So that's what I got for you today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I feel the love. If you want a little bit more Dr. Ericka, you are always welcome to check out my podcast, Better with Dr. Ericka. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio, all the places, or you can also find it betterthepodcast.com. If you just want a little bit more of me, I'm here on Tuesday. So first I want to give you a little round of applause for showing up for yourself because you did. Sending much love. And I want to say thank you for choosing you. That's some great stuff. And thank you for really looking to invest in yourself and your community. So as I said before, you can always catch me on Tuesdays. You can see old videos if you want. You can always binge the podcast. I have some new stuff coming out for you soon. I'm really excited. So I just want to say thank you. All of that. You can find me here Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'm always excited to spend time with all of you. The next thing is please share this information because these are resources that it's great to know them ahead of time. It's really difficult to start trying to search and find that stuff when you're in the middle of a crisis. And when you're dealing with a crisis, even if it's not you that is in immediate pain or risk, that it's overwhelming to try to deal with those environments. It's stressful. It is so stressful that I don't want you to have to think hard. I want you to have the information at your fingertips, ready for you. Okay? Sound like a plan? So I said you can catch me on Tuesdays at 7. You can find me here. You can always find my podcast. The last thing is if you need some quality telepsych and you just want someone to talk to, I still have some spots. I'm still taking new patients. So you can go to askdrgoodwin.com, and find me. That's what I have for you tonight. Again, I am Dr. Ericka, your Harvard-trained, double-board certified psychiatrist and integrative lifestyle coach. I'm on a mission to help you be better, do better, and live better. Do that through my adult telepsychiatry, my books, my speaking, and my podcast, Better with Dr. Ericka. I do all of that to help busy people like you that give to everybody. I do this to put you back in your life. You hear? So I'm about to hop out of here, but thank you so much for joining and spending time with me. Much love. I want to tell you, take your left hand, put it on your right arm, take your right hand, put it on your left arm. Give yourself a big squeeze. You deserve it. And sending out love. I look forward to seeing you next week.